प्रोग्राम सोशल रिव्यू के एक और एपिसोड के साथ मैं हूं आपकी मेज़बान समीन नवाज़। अपने आज के इस प्रोग्राम में हम एक मरतबा फिर कुछ बात करेंगे इमिग्रेशन के हवाले से, अमेरिका में तब्दील होने वाली इमिग्रेशन पॉलिसी के हवाले से, और साबका दौरे हुकूमत में यानी कि ट्रंप के दौरे सदारत में जो इमिग्रेशन पॉलिसी थी उसमें जो चीज़ें मौजूद थीं, जो पॉलिसीज़ मौजूद थीं, उसमें जो बाइडन की आमद के बाद, जो बाइडन के सदर बनने के बाद क्या कुछ तब्दीलियाँ हुई हैं। हमने एक प्रोग्राम इस पर भी किया। आज हम कुछ बात करेंगे असाइलम के हवाले से कि वो लोग जो सियासी पनाह लेते हैं, अमेरिका में आकर दीगर ममालिक से यहाँ आते हैं और फिर वो असाइलम के लिए अप्लाई करते हैं, तो उनके लिए क्या पॉलिसी है नई इमिग्रेशन पॉलिसी में, और वो किस तरीक़ाकार के तहत जो है वो असाइलम के लिए अप्लाई कर सकते हैं, कौन से वो क़वानीन हैं जिनको फॉलो किया जा सकता है और कौन से वो तरीक़ाकार हैं जिसको फॉलो करते हुए, जिस पर अमल पैरा होते हुए उनके लिए यहाँ पर असाइलम लेना ज़्यादा आसान हो सकता है। जो बाइडन के दौरे हुकूमत में क्या कुछ तब्दीलियाँ आई हैं असाइलम के हवाले से, और ट्रंप के दौरे हुकूमत में क्या परेशानियाँ थी उन लोगों के लिए जो सियासी पनाह के लिए असाइलम की एप्लीकेशन देना चाहते थे लेकिन वो नहीं दे सके और वो पाबंद थे उन तमाम तर क़वानीन को फॉलो करने के लिए जो ट्रंप के दौरे हुकूमत में थे। क्या अब असाइलम के लिए कुछ क़वानीन में नरमी की गई है, कुछ तब्दीलियाँ आई हैं, जो बाइडन ने लोगों के लिए कुछ ख़ास मराहत दी हैं, लोगों के लिए कोई नए पॉलिसीज़ जो हैं या कुछ नए क़वानीन जो हैं वो मुतारिफ़ करवाए हैं, ऐसा है, और क्या कुछ आसानियाँ पैदा की गई हैं उन लोगों के लिए जो दीगर ममालिक से अमरीका आते हैं और यहाँ आकर असाइलम लेने की कोशिश करते हैं। इसी मौजू पर आज के इस प्रोग्राम में हम कुछ बातचीत करेंगे, जिसके लिए एक बार फिर हमारे साथ मौजूद हैं जोनाथन अफ्तालियन। हमारे आज के इस प्रोग्राम में हम उनसे कुछ सवालों के जवाब जानना चाहेंगे। इमिग्रेशन अटर्नी हैं अफ्तालियन लॉ कंपनी ग्रुप के। इनसे हम कुछ सवालों के जवाब लेंगे लेकिन एक ब्रेक के बाद। वेलकम बैक नाज़रीन। प्रोग्राम सोशल रिव्यू में एक बार फिर आपको खुश आमदीद कहेंगे। और जिस तरह से ब्रेक पे जाने से कबल बात हो रही थी असाइलम के हवाले से, असाइलम के लॉज क्या हैं यहाँ अमेरिका में, जो बाइडन ने क्या कुछ पॉलिसी तब्दील की है इमिग्रेशन की और उसमें अब क्या कुछ तब्दीलियाँ हुई, इस पर हम गुफ्तगू का आगाज़ करेंगे। मिस्टर जोनाथन अफ्तालियन हमारे साथ आज के इस प्रोग्राम में मौजूद हैं, उनसे गुफ्तगू शुरू करेंगे। बहुत शुक्रिया, थैंक यू मिस्टर जोनाथन फॉर गिविंग अस योर टाइम टू एजुकेट द कम्युनिटी इन आवर शो।
Thank you so much for having me, Samin. I'm happy to help any way I can.
Jonathan, does Biden administration change anything in term of asylum seekers?
So the Biden administration with asylum seekers, so far what he has done is he's created a task force to oversee what exactly is going on at the border in terms of separation of families, in terms of who's allowed to come in and seek asylum, and who they're making stay in Mexico while claiming for asylum. So one, he's created a task force so that he could see exactly what's going on and then make laws around that. Two, what he's done is he's rescinded, he's taken back the national emergency at the border as well. So what Trump did was he created a national emergency at the border so that a lot of our taxpayers, a lot of our funds get allocated into extra support for the wall and stopping people from coming over. So Biden was able to take that out and reallocate that money, that resources to other things that would better suit immigrants as well. In terms of specific laws, he hasn't made sweeping changes yet. But we'll see what happens as time moves on.
Okay, my next question is, during Donald Trump, asylum seekers has to wait years to hear from immigration. Does the new administration change the wait time?
So, as you noted, there's been a long wait times for people who have claimed asylum during Trump. What Trump did was he did a policy called first in, first out, which meant that when you come here and you claim asylum, those people who claim asylum most recently get the first interviews. And the reason why he did this was because it's very difficult to obtain asylum in the United States. A lot of people don't seek representation in terms of attorneys. So what Trump wanted to do was get people out of the United States as soon as possible. He didn't want people staying here and working and living their lives and then going for asylum. So he created a policy where if you apply for asylum, a month or two later, maybe 3 months max later, you'd get your interview. And then they would try to deport you from the interview. So that's why Trump implemented that policy. Now with Biden, he says that he's going to go back to the policy where it was the people who filed first get the first interviews, and he's going to go away from this Trump first in, first out policy. We haven't seen that yet, but he's indicated that that is what he wants to do. So hopefully, once that does pass and once that starts being implemented, all the people who have been waiting 4, 5, 6 years even sometimes, those will be the ones who get priority in terms of the interview because they had their applications in first.
Jonathan, can you tell us about incoming immigration bill?
Yes, so the immigration bill that Biden proposes is going to do sweeping reforms to all of immigration, which is very, very much needed right now because a lot of the immigration rules and laws are outdated. They've only been created and amended one time, and when it was changed, the last change that it had was in the early 1990s. So we're very much in need for a big immigration reform. And a lot of what he proposes is to do with drug-related convictions, criminal-related convictions, which is very harsh on immigration right now. For example, if you have a marijuana violation, a lot of states right now have legalized marijuana, but still in terms of the Immigration Nationality Act and our immigration laws, that marijuana conviction can still deport you, can still separate you from your family. So Biden is proposing sweeping changes in immigration law, which is very much needed because the immigration laws right now are very outdated. They've only been amended one time, and that was in the early 1990s. And state laws, federal laws have all changed since the early 1990s. What has not changed is immigration laws. So, for example, the immigration laws right now are still very harsh on simple possession of marijuana, which has been legalized in a lot of states. And that a possession of marijuana conviction, depending on the type of conviction or how many convictions, it could definitely it can have people deported, separated from their families, even though right now it's decriminalized and legalized in many states. So that's just one example. He's proposing a lot of amendments, a lot of changes. Now, hopefully it gets passed in Congress. We're not exactly sure on the details once it goes as a bill, but we do know that he has been, at least so far from what he's saying, one of the most positive and open presidents that we've had with regards to immigration. So we would hope whatever policies and whatever Congress ends up passing reflects upon an openness to immigration.
ओके, यहाँ हम एक ब्रेक लेंगे, ब्रेक के बाद वापस आएंगे तो जॉनथन अफ्तालियन से कुछ गुफ्तगू का सिलसिला जारी है, कुछ सवालात हैं जिनके हम जवाबात ले रहे हैं। एक मुख्तसर से वक्फे के बाद हमारे साथ रहिए। वेलकम बैक नाज़रीन, प्रोग्राम सोशल रिव्यू में एक बार फिर आपको खुशामदीद कहेंगे। जोनाथन अफ्तालियन आज के इस प्रोग्राम में हमारे साथ मौजूद हैं और हम असाइलम के हवाले से उनसे कुछ गुफ्तगू कर रहे हैं कि असाइलम के हवाले से जो क़वानीन में तब्दीली आई है या जो नरमी उन लोगों के लिए की गई है जो दीगर ममालिक से यहाँ आते हैं और सियासी पनाह के लिए यहाँ पर अप्लाई करना चाहते हैं, उनसे हम क्या कुछ उनको एजुकेट कर सकते हैं, कम्यूनिटी को इस पर गुफ्तगू कर रहे हैं। जोनाथन, कैन एन असाइली ट्रैवल टू हिज होम country after he or she received the green card?
Okay, this is a great question. I'm sure a lot of people think about whether they could go back home. So it's a two-part answer. The first part is what actually is the definition of an asylee. So when you come here and you claim asylum and your asylum is granted, you are technically an asylee. After 1 year that you're physically present in the United States, you can apply for your green card. Once you obtain your green card, then you are a green card holder. You are no longer an asylee. So, in that period of time before you obtain your green card, when you are an asylee, it is best not to travel back home because you were showing your asylee status was granted because you were saying that it's unsafe for you to go back home. That if you were to go back home, it was more likely than not that you would be harmed by someone persecuting you there. Okay? Once you've obtained your green card, you are a permanent resident of the United States. As a permanent resident of the United States, you can travel abroad and you could come back. So it depends where you are in your path to your legal residence and your path to your citizenship. So in that first year where you're just an asylee, you can travel abroad. You can ask for a temporary travel document. But if you do travel back home, then when you go for your green card, it may be more difficult because you just said that you can't go back home due to fear of safety, and then when you go to your green card interview, you show that you've traveled back home. So that is probably not the best idea. I would not recommend doing that. Now, once you become a green card holder, then you are more free to travel. If it's unsafe for you to go back home, you should probably not go back home, but you could still travel anywhere you want. You do have to come back into the United States. I'd say every 4 months or so is a good time to come back because you want to show that you intend to permanently reside here. And then after 5 years of having your green card, you could apply for U.S. citizenship. Once you have your citizenship, then you really have nothing to worry about, and you could travel anywhere you like for as long as you like.
Tell us please, after arriving into the United States, what the time frame a person can claim asylum?
So this is another great question. You have 1 year. You have up to 1 year to claim asylum in the United States. That means you touch U.S. soil and you have to file for asylum 364 days, within 364 days of touching that soil, of U.S. soil. There are ways to overcome that 1 year rule, but it does become a lot more complicated. So once you come here, if you know that you want to claim asylum, you should definitely reach out to an attorney. You should file for asylum within 1 year of entering the United States.
Jonathan, the asylum person, the applicant of the asylum, when they get to the United States, so those people has to have a legal entry in United States, or they can just cross the border and file the asylum. If they get into the United States illegally, so are they able to file the application for asylum?
Yes, as long as you're in the United States and you're on United States soil, you have the right to file for asylum. Now, when you're crossing the border, let's say you're crossing the border illegally, if you do not get caught by border patrol, you come here, you could claim asylum. Doesn't matter how you got to the United States, you're here in the United States. If you get caught at the border and you're already on U.S. soil and you want to claim asylum at that point, they'll detain you at the border and they'll give you what's called a credible fear interview. They'll give you an interview at the border and ask you basic asylum type questions. If the officer at the border feels that you have a good case for asylum, that doesn't mean they're approving your case. That means that you have a credible fear of going back to your home country. Then they would allow you to come in the United States and continue your asylum case in the United States. If they don't feel like you have a credible fear, if they feel like you're making it up, if you're lying, if you don't really have a fear of going back home, then they'll send you back across the border.
Jonathan, can someone file asylum claim while he or she is physically not in United States, they are in another country?
The answer to that is no. Our immigration laws only allow you to file asylum when you're touching American soil. You have to physically be here to claim asylum. That does not mean that you cannot get in from other places in the world. You would be filing as a refugee if you're outside of the country. So it's a difference in terminology, and it's a difference in terms of what you actually have to do to obtain that. So you could file as a refugee, but that's not as much through the US laws. That's more through our treaties, which would allow you to file as a refugee. For example, through the United Nations, you could do that. It's more rare, it's more complicated. That's why everyone tries so hard to actually get to the United States and then file for asylum. In terms of family members, let's say one family member comes to the United States, claims asylum. Once that family member gets their asylum case approved and they're Asylee, then they could file for their family members who are overseas as refugees. And they would come as refugees, and then the family would all be here together until they're able to file for their green cards.
Okay, in this new immigration bill, does it have any special benefits for asylum seekers?
It's difficult to tell because that immigration bill, it's still it's at its early stages. So we don't know exactly what it's going to look like. But again, it's going to be a very open and liberal bill that's going to help immigration. We just don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet.
थैंक यू मिस्टर जोनाथन अफ्तारियन आज के इस प्रोग्राम में हमारे साथ मौजूद थे और हम कुछ बात कर रहे थे असाइलम सीकर्स के हवाले से या उन लोगों के हवाले से जो सियासी पनाह के लिए अमेरिका में किस तरह से तरीक़ाकार है और जिसको फॉलो करते हुए वो अप्लाई कर सकते हैं वहाँ की नेशनैलिटी के लिए या वहाँ पर पनाह हासिल करने के लिए, और किस तरीक़ाकार के तहत उनको तमाम तर चीज़ें जो है वो हासिल हो सकती हैं और किस तरह से वो एक अमरीकी शहरी की तरह से वहाँ पर महफूज रह सकते हैं। आज के इस प्रोग्राम के लिए फ़िलहाल इतना ही। अगले हफ्ते एक और प्रोग्राम के साथ आपके सामने हाजिर होंगे। प्रोग्राम टीम के साथ समीर नवाज को इजाज़त दीजिए। अल्लाह।